Rogers has joined the Admiral and myself in studio. And gentlemen, this is what I want to ask you guys about. I always refer to this paper from the New York City Police Department because it really is absolutely amazing. It goes through the radicalization process, Safali ideology, which motivates young men and women who are born in the West or who lived in the West for a long time to become terrorists or create or commit acts of terrorism. And there are four distinct stages, if you will. Now, you know, everyone doesn't always go through all four, but they're pretty distinct. And I think if the public could learn to identify them, they could really help the police and law enforcement in thwarting some of these things. Pre-radicalization, self-identification, indoctrination, and jihadization. Steve, you've worked with the FBI counterterrorism task force. You've been in law enforcement for a long time. Everyone's saying the public has to help and step up more. Say something, see something. We know the politically correct obstacles, but there's also the training obstacles. How do we know what we're seeing?
Well, Charles, a few things to keep in mind. Some time ago on your show, I said that there come a day when the field of battle will no longer be in the Middle East. It'll be on the streets of our country. It's here. It's important that the people understand it. This is how the people can engage in this war. It is a war. Let's make no mistake about it. Intelligence gathering, information gathering is very, very important. And Charles, there's no doubt in my mind, as in other investigations in this one, we're going to find out that someone heard something or saw something. So how do we do this? Well, you got community policing programs that are going to be set up across the country once again, and we're going to get the people and the police back together so that when the people see something, they're going to say something to that local cop, and he'll be trained enough to understand that this is not just something that should be laying in a file. This is something that's going to have to go up to the FBI, et cetera.
Manpower, resources, those sort of things. We're in the midst of passing taxes, passing budgets, the debate over debts and deficits. How much should we be spending on military? Does this, again, once again, sort of realign our priorities, if you will? Admiral?
Well, thanks for the promotion. Never got out of Army captain, by the way.
I'm sorry. Ambassador, I meant to say. You have so many titles, I kind of get confused.
I think that we are in a situation where we've got to recognize that we're going to be fighting for a long time, and it is war. You're absolutely right in formulating it that way, and it also has to be.
But is this a combination war of attrition, or why does it have to be so long? Why can't we win this war within a generation, within a certain time period?
Would that it were possible. We're good at short wars. Long wars like Vietnam hang around our necks, and people get frustrated and say exactly what you just asked. And it's tough. And we're not good at that.
Well, one of the reasons I think we're not good at that, and it began perhaps with the Vietnam War, when war came into our living rooms and people started to see the mangled bodies and they started seeing the body bags, and the public lost, they had a distaste for it. And so, you know, even when we had the Iraq War, once we hit a certain death count, I thought it was around 2,000, I saw a distinct shift in public support. And it goes down quickly. And that, to a degree, does tie the hands of the commander-in-chief and everyone else trying to win these wars.
But, Charles, we also have the, and I hate to put it in this terms, and please, I don't mean the way it may sound, but the problem of the First Amendment and the problem of the Fourth Amendment. We have, unfortunately, a lot of liberal judges and a lot of liberals in this country who, at all costs, do not want, for example, the FBI or law enforcement to tap into anyone's phone, like we saw in San Bernardino, where there may be critical information to fight terrorism. So my point is, we're going to have to make a decision in this country. And by all means, I don't suggest that we diminish our rights. But when it comes to the safety of this country, we're going to have to, at some point, say, you know what, we're going to have to give the law enforcement, especially the NSA, the ability to do what they have to do to prevent a terrorist attack.
Michael Pregent, I want to go back out to you. I could hear that sounds like you wanted to chime in there.
Well, I agree. There's things we have to do. The problem is it's manpower. It's sharing intelligence with local law enforcement. Again, we have a bunch of veterans and a bunch of Iraqis who worked with us to root out al-Qaeda in Iraq that would be great assets for local law enforcement and for the Department of Homeland Security. They can help us engage the Sunni communities, the Muslim communities in the United States to actually develop sources and actually bring them into the fold. We're going to learn a lot about this individual, and again, he's probably going to show up on the radar somewhere. it's not confirmed, but it shows that he may have a Florida license.
Right.
A Florida driver's license, so
Right.
we don't know.
Well, there's a picture of a license floating around on the internet. We're trying to confirm before we start to
Right.
speculate. But
Yeah, I'm not just saying
Sure.
that I saw it out there. Yeah.
Yeah. Listen, we're going to get all that information. I think Steve is right. When we connect these dots, I think we're going to find neighborhoods where you'll probably see, heightened areas of suspicion. And that means we're going to have the will and courage, that's a word that's been used here a lot tonight, to actually do something about it, to be more offensive rather than more in these tragedies. By the way, I do want to share with the audience a statement from New York City schools. Quote, "Today there was an act of terror in close proximity to several schools in Lower Manhattan. We stand with the entire city as we mourn the senseless loss of life. We are grateful to the first responders and school staff who work tirelessly to help keep our schools and communities safe. Ongoing guidance and trauma counseling will be provided across schools to those in need tomorrow." I also want to share an email from a frequent guest and the mother of a Stuyvesant High School student, and she also runs the Parents Association, Heather Higgins, and she emailed me to say very good news, if there is possibly good news in the event of this terrorist event, but her son was okay, and to the best of her knowledge, all the students are safe. Students and staff are safe. Of course, she wished the next of kin. Their wishes went out to the next of kin, but she runs the Parents Association for Stuyvesant High School. All right, so to get back to this, as this information starts to come out there and we start to learn more and more about this, hold on, guys. Let's go back down to the scene because we do have Connell McShane with an update. Connell.
Well, just to add, Charles, that you and I spoke a few minutes ago, we were mentioning how it's Halloween tonight, and there's a big popular parade here that's held every Halloween in New York City. Well, moments ago we heard from one of the mayor of New York, Bill de Blasio's top aides, Eric Phillips, his press secretary, says the mayor right now is on his way there. He's on his way to the parade, the press secretary says, to inspect the security upgrades that they've made this morning or this evening along that parade route. So the mayor is going to the parade is going forward. They've made what they've described as security upgrades along the parade route. So it'll be something else to monitor tonight, Charles. I'll just say that the police officials, including New York City Police Commissioner Jimmy O'Neill, earlier said that this incident is over, meaning there's nothing else that they're investigating. That said, they have made some upgrades along that parade route, and that's where the mayor's on his way right now.
Connell McShane, thank you very, very much. We have on the phone with us Pat Bronson, a former NYPD detective. The parade goes on, life goes on, Pat. Is that the right way to handle this? And do you feel like they're sort of coming to a very quick conclusion that this is over?
Well, I think it's premature to speculate with that degree of precision that it's over, but it seems like a lone act or a lone, really bad, evil, disgusting piece of garbage in my view. But the fact is that you do have to continue because otherwise the whole concept of terrorization has won, and it's such a sad day. It's such a terrible day. But I got to say, there is one slightly optimistic thing that came out of this, one glimmer of hope. And I just want to share it with your listening audience because I just learned it from some of my contacts deep within the New York's finest organization, that the officer who shot this savage shot him in the groin. So he was shot in the groin. So hope springs eternal.
Okay. Hey, well, hold on one second because we had another statement from the office of Cuomo, and there is an enhanced security at high-profile locations such as airports and bridges. So there are precautionary measures being taken even as we continue with the famous Halloween parade here in New York City. Steve Rogers, I wanted to go back to you because life does go on, and you talk a lot on a micro level. We look at this a lot from the macro level and war across the globe and how we're winning that. But on the micro level, when it hits ordinary people who aren't prepared for it, the folks who are on that bike path, they were not soldiers. They weren't trained for this. They don't have the psychology of it. The students who walked out of that high school, in fact, only 20 minutes ago from lockdown, they weren't prepared for this. How do we keep our nation safe? And I'm not just saying safe from being shot, but having to watch this.
Situational awareness, very important. Charles, we have to recondition ourselves to understand that we are at war and that we're going to have to be very, very vigilant with regard to our surroundings, with regard to conversations we're hearing, with regard to what we're seeing on the internet. And by all means, I'm not suggesting that we should spy on our neighbors, for goodness sakes, but because we're at a war footing now, we're going to have to be very, very vigilant and be very, very courageous to step up and to make that phone call when needed.
We still have Lieutenant Randy Sutton in Las Vegas Police, and I want to bring him back. You know, Randy, the day began with economic data out of Las Vegas. Business on the Strip through the roof, business at the casinos through the roof, and it feels like, man, Las Vegas went back to a state of normalcy pretty quick. In fact, better than most people thought. Is that indeed the case? And if it is, does that worry you?
No, economically, Vegas is doing just fine. We didn't even see a tick on the radar screen. But I can tell you from a different perspective that Vegas is not the same. There is a pall over the city. Every person I know has had some type of connection with one of the victims of this horrific murder spree. So although economically the city is going to be doing okay and is doing okay, it hasn't recovered, and it'll be a long time before it does in the human factor.
Michael Prejean, I want to go back out to you because we talk global strategy with respect to defeating this enemy that reconstitutes itself fairly quickly, and so you take them down to one area and they're reconstituted somewhere else, and that does give a sense of hopelessness or frustration to this fight.
Yeah, the biggest issue is we haven't defeated ISIS. We've taken territory away from ISIS, and we haven't used American forces to defeat ISIS. We've used proxy forces on the ground in Iraq and in Raqqa and Deir ez-Zor, and in each case they've allowed ISIS to leave. I just got back from Mosul about 60 days ago, and I drove to Mosul in a taxi cab, and the security posture there already indicates that there's going to be security backslide in Mosul, Iraq. These are areas where ISIS will continue to operate, whether it's Al-Qaeda, Al-Qaeda-like model, ISIS 2.0, but we have not defeated ISIS, and again, this helps the brand. Anytime some crazy does something, ISIS gets credit, whether we give it to them through the media or they take credit for something, like Las Vegas when they had nothing to do with that. So this is unfortunately the way it is right now. And again, ISIS has not been militarily defeated. We've simply taken their territory away in Iraq and Syria.
Sure.
They'll get it somewhere else, unfortunately.
I want to go back, Ambassador, to your ambassador hat, because today in our planning meeting, one of the topics we were considering talking about was New York City, Bill de Blasio passing some sort of law that would have them not enforce President Trump's immigration policies. And we talk about cooperation and the way to win this thing. At some point, don't we need the federal government and these local governments on the same page, particularly high-profile cities like New York City? There's no way in the world they can continue to sort of buck the security measures that are coming from the commander-in-chief and keep us safe, is there?
I don't see how they can buck it. The president made a big mistake by starting out by talking about religions here, and we got a First Amendment, and barring somebody with a particular religion from immigrating to the country is just a non-starter. But once he shifted to barring people from individual countries and selected countries which do in fact have a lot of people who with allegiance to ISIS and all the rest, he I think was being reasonable, and it's a reasonable approach. The identity of those countries will probably change from time to time, but that's very much consistent with his obligations to protect the country as commander-in-chief. So I think Mr. de Blasio is really off on a very bad toot. Okay.
By the way, I want to share with the audience, we do have the identity of the driver who plowed through that New York City bike path. Saifulo Saipoth is his name. More information is coming in about that. Potentially, well, there's a lot more information we'll have momentarily. And And again, we do understand the cooperation, Steve, you talk about it all the time, and the cooperation that's needed. New York City residents, I certainly don't want this to continue to happen because once we see the photographs of these victims, it's going to be a reflection of all of our society.
Charles, Mayor de Blasio is going to have to work with the president. The president has made a commitment to the people, and he's going to keep it. Keep law enforcement working together.
All right, once again, we had a tragic terror.
The person running the FBI at the time, when the FBI failed